Hey, hello. Hope you're doing all right. Hope you're well this evening. Happy Wednesday to you. If you're joining us from elsewhere in the world, maybe good morning. Hope you're having a good lunch. But if you are here in Australia, then good evening and welcome to Finder's Inflation and Money Tips Masterclass. Now, we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. It's all around the theme of inflation, but for reasons that you'll understand a bit later, that kind of brings everything under the sort of the broad church, the big tent of finance. Let me introduce the panel. My name's Tim Bennett. I'm a money expert at Finder, but today really just facilitating the people who I'm really excited to talk about and talk to. Actually, before that, I do want to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today across Australia, and to pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Our panelists are joining us from the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi, the Yugambeh, and the Awabakal peoples, and I'm speaking to you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are joining us on the call today. So let's start with Nicole Pedersen-McKinnon, independent personal finance expert. You've seen her writings in the SMH, the Age, the Canberra Time, all over the television and on finder.com.au. Nicole, nice to have you here again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tim.
Sarah Megginson is head of editorial at Finder. She's an incredibly prolific writer, 25 plus best-selling non-fiction books as an editor or writer. Sarah, lovely to have you around again.
Thank you for that glowing introduction.
You're the one who did all the hard work. Alison Banney is the money editor at Finder, also prolific and has spent over a decade writing about finance for Finder, but then also for many other mastheads like Yahoo Finance, Money Magazine, and Dynamic Business. Alison, g'day.
Hello, good to be here.
So if you have been living under a rock for a bit, well, let's be honest, the price of that rock is going up. No, inflation is something that has been talked about right across the world as well as here in Australia. It seems that Australia was maybe a little lagging, and maybe we'll find out why that may or may not have been the case. But inflation has finally hit our shores, whether it's the war in Ukraine, the sort of hangover from COVID, or sort of ongoing crises around chip shortages or supply chain. Inflation is impacting the cost of everyday items, from your groceries, your cars, insurance, I was going to say train tickets, but I'm not sure if it's quite got there yet. But the fact is, in fact, today I think 7-Eleven coffees are now twice as expensive. So there you go. It's making a real difference. And we're going to get stuck into that and understand what it means for you and how you can respond. But one more formality before we do get started. The Finder Masterclass today is intended to provide you with tips, tools, and strategies that will help you make better decisions. That's our number one goal. And although we are licensed and authorized, we're not providing any form of financial, tax, or legal advice tonight. Please consider your own situation and get proper advice about your individual circumstances before making any decisions based on anything in this masterclass. Nothing that we say is personal financial advice. All right, let's get into it. I've used the word inflation a lot. Nicole, how about you take us through the 101? What is inflation?
Yeah, 100%. And look, it occurred to me during your intro, Tim, that who would have thought of any of us really 6 months ago that we'd be turning up at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night to hear an inflation masterclass? I mean, the world went mad a couple of years ago and it just gets crazier, right? So let me unpack the mumbo jumbo version of inflation first of all, and then let's get down to what it really means and how we can combat it, because that's obviously what tonight's all about. So inflation is the CPI, right? It's the Consumer Prices Index, and that's what you just referred to, Tim. That's the price of pretty much everything going up all at once. You know, we've kind of seen this 30-year spike, which has happened just so rapidly, to 6.1%. Now, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, says that inflation rate's going to be at 7.75% by the end of the year. So it's not over yet by any means. Having said that, there are indications overseas that maybe inflation is peaking. It's going to be slow to flow through, but maybe it is peaking. So we've got petrol that's up more like 33%, you know, and don't forget, we've got that discount on the fuel excise rolling off at the end of September. So that's going to be 22 cents more, an overnight jump. We've got fruit and veggies impacted by the floods. We've got all the factors stemming from the macro issues that are going on, those big picture geopolitical things like the war in the Ukraine. ongoing coronavirus crisis in China and initiatives to try and lock that down, and then all this supply chain stuff where the things we want just aren't getting to us. There's just too much of a backlog. So that's what's kind of feeding into this price spike that's really pretty universal. Petrol, fruit and veg, everything you care to mention, really. So if we're talking coffee's going up, things are pretty dire. I don't drink coffee, so it's pretty much the only thing I feel okay about. But today, Domino's pizzas, the value range is going from $5 to $8 because Domino's reported today, and they've seen a 14% fall in profit. So everything that we're seeing on a household level is actually flowing through to the companies as well, which is kind of doubling down because it means that those companies are hiking out prices even further. So yeah, bad news, 60% hike in Domino's pizzas. But you know what? The good news on that front is that wheat and cheese prices are apparently coming down, according to Domino's as well. So again, some early indications that maybe inflation is peaking, and maybe we won't be contending with this forever because, of course, the RBA is trying to slam on the brakes, adding $600 to the average mortgage just in 4 months. And I know Sarah's going to talk to that.
Yeah, and I just before we move on to Sarah, just to give us like a reference point, we're talking about 6.1, 7.7. I think it was 5.1 a couple of months ago. What's a typical inflation rate?
Yeah, so this is what kind of often gets missed, is that the Reserve Bank of Australia, people think they're in charge of the broader economy, exchange rates, property prices, that they're factoring all these things in, wages, which, by the way, wages growth is only like less than half what inflation is now at. In fact, they have one job, and that one job is to keep inflation between 2 and 3%. Arguably, that band is too low for what's going on in the world now, because that's a pretty tough gig right now. But you can see that it's double that. So that's why it's slamming on the brakes, so dramatically.
All right, Sarah, let's sort of unpack that a bit more. So I guess, what is the cash rate and why is it changing as a result of this?
Yes, very good question. And one of the challenges that we have, I think, more broadly, is that people relate the cash rate to mean the interest rate that you pay on your mortgage, which makes sense because whenever there's an RBA meeting, we talk about your mortgages are going up. But the cash rate is actually the amount that the RBA sets, that it represents, in really simple terms, it represents the amount that banks pay each other for money, because banks are constantly borrowing off each other to fund your loans and mortgages. So the cash rate kind of represents how much their loan is costing them. They add their profit margin on top of that, and then they lend it to you. So for a very long time, the cash rate has been extremely low. The lowest it has been on record, it got down to 0.1% during the pandemic. And that is a dangerously low amount, because the cash rate is the only tool the Reserve Bank of Australia has to be able to combat inflation. So if we had this situation, where we had low deflation, the opposite of inflation, which is what happened during COVID, we had to really quickly spark the economy and make sure that property markets continued to tick over and that people, that the economy didn't just tank. So we cut the cash rate very, very quickly, cut to a huge amount, very, very fast. And mortgages went down. So we all had a little bit more disposable income. And then we were able to spend a bit more freely. And it took the pain out of the economic crisis for a lot of people. Now we're on the other side of that. So the cash rate is steadily going up. And in news that isn't very helpful to most people that have a mortgage, we're actually just getting back to what is quite a normal rate. But what has happened over the last couple of years is that we've had a flood of first home buyers get into the market. We've had the RBA say that we're not looking at increasing rates till 2024. It was a really strong narrative. So a lot of people thought, I'm going to have this low rate mortgage for a few years. I'm going to be able to get ahead, or, I won't have to worry about rising rates for a couple of years. And then unfortunately, that isn't the case. It turned very, very quickly. And as Nicole said before, 6 months ago, we wouldn't have thought we were sitting here. At Finder, we stay really, really close to the statistics. We have a panel of 40 economists who we work with every month to kind of get their pulse check. And I just recently looked back at what they were saying at the beginning of the year, and they're really smart. And a lot of them were predicting that rates would increase sooner than 2024. But none of them predicted at this level or this fast, or, even I can remember speaking to Gareth Ed. He's at CommBank. I spoke to him just in the beginning of May, and he back then was still predicting 1% would be the maximum growth by 2024. Well, now we're well past that. So I think this really took a lot of people by surprise. And the bottom line for everyone is that the Reserve Bank basically is using this measure, the cash rate, to try and take some of your discretionary spending away so that inflation stops growing so fast. And they will keep doing that while the numbers are high, while the inflation numbers are high.
And I guess that's it's also probably worth pointing out that it's not just about making you have less money to be able to spend because your mortgage payments went up or whatnot, but it's also reducing the amount of spending that's available from businesses and sort of larger organizations. So at every sort of level, even if you were to rent, a change in the RBA cash rate can make a difference. Yeah. I tell you what, though, Sarah, off the back of what you said, I feel like the reputation of the Reserve Bank is in a bit of dire straits at the moment. But that's...
I don't envy them. I don't envy their job. I don't envy their reputation. And you know what? That it's not a tall order to just constantly be aiming for that 2 to 3% band. It's tricky, and you know the impact on everyday Australians is massive. These mortgage hikes are just so big, and so many people are in stress now. And it's, you know, unfortunately, there's still probably a few more rate rises to go.
All right, so that's a bit of background, and we're going to jump over to Alison and find out some tips that you can start to use. But I just want to sort of reset and let you know that we want to hear from you. This is a two-way conversation. So whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, now is the time for you to ask your questions. So we've got our team looking at the Facebook streams, and that's the best place to ask those questions. And if you do, you know, throw a comment in the Facebook feed. We're going to pick our 5 favorite ones, and there's going to be a little bonus for our 5 favorite comments at the end of the stream. So please get involved, because obviously we want to answer the questions and make your life a little bit easier, make you make better decisions. But also, you know, if we can spice things up a little, that's great too. While you're there, of course, if you happen to be on YouTube, you know, leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, like our Facebook page, all the normal stuff. All right, Alison Banney, let's talk about, I guess, some actionable items. What would your approach to sort of dealing with this in the first case be?
Yeah, I think the first thing to note is that inflation, there's lots of figures flying around for inflation at the moment. The headline rate is 6.1%. That's the average rate that cost of living is going up over the year. But there's lots of things that go into that figure. There's lots of items in the basket, as it's called, that go into that figure. So some things are going up a lot more than others. One of those things is the cost of building a house, so new dwellings. That's gone up. I think it's like 20% or something over the past year. So, and other things haven't quite gone up by that 6%. It's an average. So I think my first tip would be not to panic, not to just completely freak out and, you know, hear all these numbers and get spooked. Just to really look at your own spending and look at where your money is going at the moment, because you might find that it's actually not gone up by as much as all these, you know, rates and things flying around saying that it has. So yeah, I think really look at your own spending, look where you can make some savings, cut back a bit. The thing that's going to impact most of us would be like your groceries, fuel, rent, that kind of thing. So yeah, looking at where you can cut back and save, that would be my very first tip.
Yeah, so let's talk about some other options in terms of, I guess, continuing to sort of make money. Do you have any suggestions in terms of where people should be, again, not financial advice, but generally speaking, what people should be thinking about in terms of where to invest the cash that they've got?
Yeah, I think I'd love to be the bearer of bad news, good news, sorry, in this situation. I think savings accounts are, you know, the one positive sort of thing coming out of this at the moment. So rates are going up everywhere, like the cash rate, home loan rates, but that is also the case for savings account rates and term deposits, so deposit accounts in banks. The reason for this is that as banks increase their home loan rates, so that's obviously bad news for people with a mortgage, they're getting more money in from consumers that way. So I guess it's kind of only fair, right, that they pay a bit more out to people who have their cash in a savings account. They don't need to do this. They don't need to raise their savings rates in line with their home loan rate increases, but they do get a lot of pressure to do so from consumers, the media, regulators, and even the government. So yeah, banks are increasing their interest rates quite significantly for savings accounts and term deposits at the moment. So this is good news if you have cash in the bank, you're trying to save money at the moment for house deposit or a trip or a rainy day, whatever it might be. Maybe you're a retiree or a pre-retiree and you've got cash in the bank. So yeah, it's really good news for people that are cash heavy at the moment or just looking to earn a bit more money on their cash.
And for I actually changed my bank about 12 months ago, and it wasn't nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. If people are like maybe shopping around for different banks, what's like a good savings account interest rate at the moment? What is like, where would the number that you would want to start seeing start?
Yeah, so about, as Sarah said before, we've seen rates rise pretty quickly over the past 6 months, so a lot quicker than anyone sort of thought was going to happen. About 12 months ago, you'd be lucky to find a good ongoing savings rate of 1.5%. Now there's several accounts in the market offering 3% or even up to 3.5%. Is probably about the highest at the moment. This is still changing monthly as the cash rate goes up. But yeah, I'd say anything over that sort of 2.5% is good. 3% is really good at the moment. But keep in mind that savings accounts, they don't just give you this rate for nothing. So they do make you work a little bit for it. So there are conditions that you'll need to meet with most of these high interest savings accounts.
And that's
so
like putting a certain amount in each month and stuff like that, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So most accounts will want to know that you're growing your balance in the account, because the bank wants you to keep growing your balance because it's good for them too, right? They use your money to fund their loans and investments and things like that. So they'll ask you to deposit a certain amount a month. Now this changes between different accounts. So one account might ask you to deposit, say, $20 a month to meet the condition to earn the bonus interest, whereas another account could be up to $2,000 amount. So it really depends on your ability to save, what your income looks like. And if you do have to deposit a bit more, just check that you are getting a higher rate for that and it's worth it. Because if you can't meet those conditions, you won't earn the bonus rate and you'll earn very low or next to no interest at all. So yeah, make sure you check the conditions before just opting for the highest rate.
And if you are looking to compare whether it's savings accounts or term deposits, or even if you're thinking about refinancing a mortgage or some other sort of financial decision, you can go to finder.com.au to compare all the options out there on the market. There's a lot of competition in pretty much every sort of financial product that you can think of, which means there are deals to be had if you're active enough and happy to sort of spend a few minutes working and trying to figure out if there's a better deal. With that, let's start talking about what we can do to stop spending so much money. I can think of a couple off the top of my head, but Nicole, maybe we can start with you. Do you have any thoughts on where people might start thinking about shaving some dollars off that budget?
Yeah, so I kind of talk about a few concepts here which kind of wrap around a budget and your life in money, if you like. So inspiration is the first thing, the need, the desire to do it. And I think inflation's given us all the inspiration, that push we probably needed. Then there's stingispiration, which is kind of that more cutting back, like reducing our lifestyle, diminishing our consumption. We all do it. We're all doing it more. There's probably further we can go, and we might get to that point as well, but it's not fun. No one wants to do it. It's not very appealing. I prefer to think about the winspiration. And that's really like pulling the levers that are there for us, like working the system to massage our money and make it go further. So that's things like, your so-called fixed costs. There is no such thing as a fixed cost. Like these are all your bills in your life that, you've signed up to the products. They're there ticking away in the background. The direct debit might come out each and every month. But just allowing that to happen, I call that being a bill deal, like letting digitally induced laziness just kind of suck all your money up. Which means that all you're left with is that sort of that lever to pull of where you have to cut back and you have to stay home and you have to quit the fun stuff, which is something that's not appealing for anybody. So I'm talking about your mortgages, which we'll come back to a lot because that is literally the biggest potential saving right now. I've never seen anything like it. Contrary to what the Reserve Bank is doing, you can actually save a lot of money on your mortgage right now. You're talking about every utility in your life, your gas, your electricity even, although of course those markets are very, very pushed at the moment. Every insurance in your life, your credit cards, everything can be overhauled. So it's really never been more important to kind of get that comparison of what that you could be spending and what better deal you could be getting. Because if you've had those deals in place for 2 years or more, you're probably getting ripped off. You're probably throwing away money, and no one can afford that right now.
Sarah, what are your thoughts? Where would you start to think about saving some money or maybe making a bit of extra?
Such a great question. And it's one I have answered many, many times in the last few weeks. So many friends are asking this as well. It's, I think, top of mind for everyone. My very first thing that I would say is if you have any kind of sense of loyalty to your bank or your lender, I would kick that to the curb. There was a report from ASIC this week, and it blew my mind. And I knew the details already, but just seeing the figures just was shocking. And ASIC in the last few years have fined, or the banks, 6 of the major banks, the biggest financial institutions in Australia, have had to repay $36 billion to consumers for providing either fees for no advice and no service, or for providing the wrong or non-compliant advice. So to me, if that is just the biggest signal that you really have to look after yourself. Your bank is not looking after you. They're not acting in your best interests necessarily. So absolutely echoing Nicole's message of comparing. It is incredible, the difference out there, not just the difference in the interest rates that you'll pay and the fees that you'll pay, but also a big difference in the access to credit that you'll have, because every lender has a different credit policy and different credit profiles. So you might have, and it's really interesting, you have all these big banks who own smaller digital banks, and they can have completely different risk profiles and different policies. So you might have one lender where you, I have had it before where a lender has rejected me for finance, whether it was for a credit card or a home loan, and I've been able to get a loan with someone else with absolutely no problems. In fact, it happened earlier this year. I got rejected for a credit card with someone with a different bank. They basically gave me an open, checkbook and said, what limit would you like? Nothing changed about my application. It's just they have really different credit profiles. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying don't be loyal to your bank. Shop around, because the difference is massive. And in fact, I just today was chatting with someone at work. We were looking at different home loan options, and just within 5 minutes of looking at different variable rates, we found a difference of around 0.7%. And when he compared it to what his own bank was offering him, because he's coming off a fixed rate, these were a full % lower. And that just adds up to hundreds of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a year. So absolutely shop around to get the best deal you can.
Yeah, and I would always echo that sentiment. I think it's worth noting as well that I don't know exactly what the laws are in different countries and different regions, but generally speaking, publicly traded companies have a legislated requirement to think about their shareholders first. So as much as their marketing might say one thing, and they might say one thing on the phone to say, oh, thanks for being such a loyal customer, they're not going to reciprocate, give back that loyalty if it means, compromising for their shareholders. At the end of the day, their bottom line is their top line, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. They're looking out for themselves, and that's what you need to do as well. And one question that I'm getting a lot at the moment is, should you fix your rates? And it's a very difficult question to answer because it really depends on your own circumstances. But what I would say is that banks rarely, in fact, they do not offer a fixed rate if they think that you're going to get a better deal overall. And a really interesting clue is looking at the rates they offer over time. If they're offering a fixed rate that goes down, in 3 years or 4 years, that means they're predicting the variable rate will be lower then. And they're trying to make the most money out of you as possible. So fixed rates are a really good idea if you crave certainty and you want to know your repayments won't change. But at the moment, fixed rates are extremely high. So I would really, really consider whether that's the right move for you.
Yeah, Nicole, I was going to say, because I know you have a bee in your bonnet about fixed rates. Go for it.
I do. I feel very strongly about this topic. And yeah, even the pricing aside, like everything Sarah just said is so very true. But fixed rate products don't always come with the ability to get out of debt early. which is another reason that the banks are trying to entice you in, because again, it's another way that they win. If you can't, ditch a few years of that 25 or 30-year contract, then you end up paying them the entire schedule of interest that you signed up for in the beginning. Every year that you manage to bring that debt freedom date forward is a year that you keep money and you keep it from a lender. So that's kind of another reason to kind of be really careful. One of the things that fixed rates don't come with generally is offset accounts, or if they do, they don't come with full offset accounts. And that's an incredibly powerful Aussie invented tool to use every dollar that passes through your hand, every dollar to your name, to really slash your mortgage interest and bring forward your debt freedom date. So that's really key. The other thing that we're sort of been skirting around in all of this is that interest rates are actually predicted to fall now. So as Sarah mentioned, those longer term fixed rates are lower than the near term ones. 4-year fixed rates, for example, are quite dramatically lower. So that exactly, as she says that interest rates are going to fall. The money markets are in fact predicting that they're going to start falling as soon as the middle of next year. That's less than a year away. So if you're locking in for more than a year, you might want to just be very careful.
I guess one thing I wanted to mention as well, off the back of what Nicole said, if there's any terminology that you're sort of not completely sure of, like if, for example, if you aren't sure what an offset account is, or if there's something that we mentioned that, you're not 100% like, I don't know exactly what that means, head over to Finder, search it on the website, and there's almost certainly an article written about it. And about 50%.
Can I take that one, Tim?
Yeah.
So backing up, apologies. An offset account is simply a parallel savings account that is hooked to your mortgage. So they can only be offered by what are called, bit of mumbo jumbo, authorized deposit taking institutions. So there are some lenders out there that say they offer offset accounts, but they're not really. They're kind of redraws in disguise. And that gets you into a little bit of dangerous territory in terms of if that money might get locked up. Either A, if a lender recalculates what you owe, or B, if you get into financial trouble. Now, there was a very high profile case of this happening when the coronavirus crisis broke, and all of a sudden people's savings that they thought they had parked safely in their mortgage were locked away from them. So that was controversial and was reversed after a parliamentary inquiry and a mass outcry, as you can imagine. But the offset account gives you an identical dollar for dollar reduction in your balance, right? So it saves you the same amount of interest as putting money directly in a mortgage, but it's just safer. Another kind of quirky thing as well is it gives you that flexibility to access the money if, say, you want to buy a different property, if you want to move, and you want to create that first property as an investment property, kind of reinvent that, because you've never technically paid down your loan balance. So that then converts very nicely to being a tax effective investment property. So it's safety and it's flexibility. I'm all about the offset account.
And of course, if any of this is something that you are thinking might apply to you, don't take this as financial advice. These are definitely the sort of decisions worth talking to someone about and getting your circumstances considered as well. Alison Banney, what are your top tips in terms of what you would stop spending money on if you were in a position where you felt the squeeze?
Yeah, I think to echo what Nicole and Sarah said, pretty much it's just time to compare everything that you've got at the moment. So one example that I had personally for myself a few weeks ago, I just went and looked through my recent bills and things like that. Like everyone else, I almost fell off my chair when I got my latest energy bill. It was just so much higher than the previous one, to the point when I thought, oh my God, like this is a mistake. It wasn't, it's just the prices have gone up so much. So I switched that. So my next one should be a lot lower, hopefully. Also my phone plan recently. So I think it goes back to what I was saying before about looking at your personal spending and sort of the situation you're in at the moment and where you can make changes. So my phone plan, opened up years ago. I haven't thought much about it. My situation's completely changed now. Like a lot of people, I work at home full time remotely. I have internet at home, so I don't need this big phone plan with all this data in it. I use like one a month or something. So yeah, I changed that, cut it back, and I saved pretty much half, cut my bill in half for my phone plan every month. So yeah, I think just looking at your spending at the moment and maybe things that you haven't considered in a long while, as you said, they just tick over every single month, but maybe your situation has changed and yeah, you can make those changes. Also trying to increase your income where you can, because there's two sides, to rising cost of living. One is reducing your spending, but also increasing the money that you're bringing in if possible. So things like if you're able to ask for a pay rise, that's excellent. If not, how else can you make some money? Can you maybe do some freelance work on the side? Can you do a side hustle? Can you rent out your car on the weekends? That kind of thing. Sell things online, whatever it is, just to bring in a bit of extra money. That's what I've been trying to think about as well.
And I think I know that a lot of people, like an immediate reaction to that is, oh, it's easier said than done, and it is. But there are some really interesting opportunities out there now. As you say, things like renting out your car, or being a little bit more aware that negotiating is something you can do.
Negotiate. You mentioned before about like the banks, not being loyal and stuff, and I just thought, well, the banks, that they're never going to call you up and say, hey, do you want a better loan? Like they're never ever going to do that. But if you call them up and say, look, I'm going to switch to this other bank, it's got this rate. My friend actually recently did it. Said, I'm going to switch to this bank. They've got this better rate. This is how much I've got left in my loan. What can you do? And, you'd be surprised how many times they would wriggle and negotiate with you.
So I'm getting word from readers and viewers and listeners kind of everywhere saying that this has never been more successful, this strategy.
Really?
So what we don't realize is that behind the scenes, behind closed door, there's actually this mortgage war going on, because there was $18 billion, it's an all-time record, refinanced just last month in home loans, as everyone kind of goes, oh my God, and it has been given the kick that they need to actually kick their lender to the curb. So a lot of the lenders are actually trying to stop that quite desperately. So they've got mortgage retention departments, which are getting really aggressive in terms of what they're offering to keep their existing borrowers. And then you've got this sort of land grab on as well for the borrowers who are disenfranchised and just frankly annoyed at what they're paying, that are desperately competing for that new business. So I've had people contact me and saying, even your online lender, where you think what you see is what you get in terms of the price on the tin is the price that you can get. I know someone who's been offered 100 basis points off from 1 2-minute phone call, just like that, off an investment loan and her home loan as well. But when you're talking about sort of, even if you don't go through with the refinance, getting all that way to the end of a refinance, I've heard of people getting discounts of like 2.5% off that headline rate from a big bank, which is something that you should always really consider a fake rate, but never so much as right now. And also there are cashbacks flying around of up to $5,000. So you really need to take advantage of that right now.
And to clarify, if I call up my bank, and because as you say, this is a huge opportunity, a quick phone call could potentially be thousands of dollars per year, depending on your mortgage. Does that, if they were to offer a discounted rate, will they renew the mortgage in some way, or is that just going to adjust the contract? How does that typically affect the term of the mortgage and the rest of the contract?
No, so they shouldn't renew the mortgage at all. They shouldn't have to do a reassessment of that loan. Similar to when you decide to say fix a bit, they shouldn't have to do a reassessment of that loan. So it should stick to the exact loan term. But I would say that, by making that phone call, you're never going to get as much of a discount as by kind of at least making noises about refinancing and maybe calling up the kind of mortgage discharge departments to sort of get the attention of the mortgage retention team, or by actually refinancing itself. And I'd point, people watching to the rate of 3.59%. That's actually, to my mind, the comparable to a big bank with a proper offset account rate that's offered by one of the cheaper outfits and smaller outfits. So that benchmark there is 3.59%. And if you call up your lender and go, hey, I could be getting 3.59% from a really quality lender, that's hopefully enough to put them on notice and get them to pass on some money to you.
That's such great advice. Anyway, look, there's a bunch of homework for you to do if you're a mortgage holder right now. Well, not right now. Wait until we're finished. But, tomorrow when business hours are in, give them a call and see if you can't, save a bit of money immediately. I just want to, before we get into some questions that you've asked, just double down on a couple of things. First of all, there's still plenty of space. We're here for another half hour or so. So if you do have a burning question, leave it in the Facebook or YouTube comments, wherever you're watching this video, and we'll try and get to it. We're going to pick our 5 favorites, and you get a little bit of a bonus as well. So with that all being said, we're going to get into some questions, but I do want to reiterate, if you've just joined us, nothing we go over today, even though we are licensed and authorized, none of what we're talking about today is any form of financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consider your own situation and get proper advice about your individual circumstances before making decisions based on anything in this masterclass. So with that out of the way, Alison, I want to ask you one of these questions first. A lot of people are out there and they're investing in the stock market. Do you think inflation is going to impact the stock market, and how?
Yes, it already has. So generally higher inflation means stock markets fall. There's a number of reasons for this. One of them is that companies, just like we have higher costs, companies have higher costs. So it's harder for them to grow their earnings. They're spending more money on the same thing. And there's also less demand from consumers because people, as we've just talked about for half an hour, people are reining in their spending. So yeah, there's less demand from consumers than perhaps there was before. And as well as, people reining in their spending, that includes investments. So people might say, oh, I can't afford right now to invest. So I won't at the moment. A decline in wages as well also impacts this. So with inflation going up and wage growth at the moment is, I think it's only about 2.5% or something. People's real wage growth is actually going backwards. So that's another reason why people might, put investing aside for the moment. So generally stock markets fall a bit when inflation goes up. What we're seeing at the moment as well is that because there's been so many interest rate rises so quickly, one after the other, and as Nicole mentioned, there's talk of rates maybe falling next year. There's just so much uncertainty in the market at the moment, which is causing volatility. So people honestly just don't really know what to expect. I mean, no one ever knows what to expect with the stock market, but at the moment, there's just so much uncertainty, and that's creating volatility in the market. So if you are looking to invest at the moment, or you are actively investing, there's probably a few tips that I can share with you. One of them being, and this goes for any time really, but my number one tip is just to always diversify. So that's going to be your best bet for volatility always and forever, particularly in this kind of environment with inflation. So instead of putting all your money in one stock or putting all your eggs in one basket, invest in a few different stocks, but also a few different sectors. So you might want to look at commodities, bonds, as well as stocks, that kind of thing. And one way to do this easily and cheaply is by looking at an ETF or an index fund. So that is basically one trade. You can buy one ETF that just trades on the stock market like a normal share would, and it tracks a whole market or a whole index. So you get access to hundreds of underlying stocks or assets in the one trade, and you don't have to worry about picking the market and timing the market and reading reports and balance sheets and all that fun stuff that no one wants to do.
And Alison, is dollar cost averaging still good advice?
Yes, that's dollar cost averaging is another thing that is always a good thing to do, but particularly in periods of volatility. So dollar cost averaging basically just means instead of, say you had $10,000, instead of just putting that all into the stock market in one day, just doing it over a period, you could invest $1,000 a month, that kind of thing. You could invest $100 a month, whatever it may be, and just doing regular smaller trades, because that way you aren't as emotionally invested as when you buy into it, and you might look at it the next day and say, oh, it's already fallen, and get stressed about that. If you're regularly buying amounts, it'll just you get the more average true cost of that investment, and you won't be as stressed out in all this volatility.
Yeah. I have a question here from YouTube, so I'll read it through. The first category that consumers will likely cut is dining out, which is probably a fair point. When do you think we'll see the peak of that reduction? I'm planning to open a cafe in Melbourne, but concerned with these inflation numbers and, of course, the cut in sort of people going out and engaging with that the hospitality industry. Sarah, you have a little bit of personal experience with this.
I am uniquely positioned to answer this question because I think I win the award of the craziest lockdown purchase because my husband and I bought a restaurant, as you do. So whoever put this question in and you're thinking of opening a cafe, I'm giving you such a massive, well done for having the courage to consider such a thing after Melbourne was so decimated through the pandemic. It's a very difficult question to answer. The challenge with discretionary spending is that, yes, one of the first things that people cut out is the non-essential things. But the flip side to that coin too is that as our spending and the economy gets a bit bleak like this, sometimes we really need to hold on to those things that bring us a little bit of joy, whether it's, your favorite restaurant and getting a burger, or your favorite coffee a couple times a week, or, keeping your streaming and things like that. People don't want to cut out literally every moment of joy in their lives. So I think the important thing to remember with this, as Nicole said earlier, we are not expecting this to be a long, protracted, dire, high rate environment for the next 10 years. Like, the banks are already starting to predict that rates will start to moderate next year. So this has been a really hard and fast, zoom up the interest rate ladder, but next year it should probably start to calm down again. I would say don't dive into it unless you have a really big safety net behind you, because interest rates and inflation are literally one of many hundreds of things you'll need to consider. And this is a really tough time to start out with. Finding employees is a really big challenge for the hospitality industry at the moment. So there's, the cost of your raw produce is going up at the moment. There are so many things to consider. It's a really good question, though, that you're thinking like that means that you're thinking long-term. So my big advice to whoever this person is to go and get a business mentor so that you've got someone to workshop these questions with. And to anyone who is trying to work out how to spend less at the moment, my big kind of ask of you is don't just think of these small businesses, because it really means the world to them when you go to a small business and you buy some takeaway or a coffee or a sandwich or whatever it is. You're literally helping people employ other people and put food on the table. So, it's a good if we can continue to support them where we can.
The closest to financial advice you'll get tonight is to go and eat a sandwich at your local cafe.
Exactly. Continue doing it.
All right. Another question came through, and this is sort of swinging back to the talk about refinancing. So, Nicole, I might get you to take this one on. There's I'll just say a few people who've agreed and who've expressed their sort of experiences agreeing with the takes you made in terms of what's available out there. However, one commenter asked, what can we do if we're already retired and they've only got a little bit of rental income? And I guess that the concern there is that the banks may pull the loans in general, or I'm not sure the context there, whether it means in general or just generally speaking, what the refinancing options are for someone who maybe doesn't have as much income as they might have because they've retired.
This is a really tough one, because the fact is that the banks really prioritize earned income over every other type of income. It's one of the consequences of the tougher lending rules that were brought in a few years ago. So unfortunately, they will kind of downgrade your investment income. So it's going to be all about your rent. And that's why we see sort of the fear and the probably reality of some landlords putting up rents further. You've kind of got 10% rental increases in the past year anyway, and in the regional areas more like 20 and 30% somewhere, in some places, which is a really tough thing, because rental stress is as acute as mortgage stress. But it's a matter of kind of balancing what you can do, what you can afford, and not getting yourself in that forced sale kind of situation.
And I think an interesting question might be off the back of that is about renting. So there's going to be, it's not quite 50%, but a significant portion of this country is paying someone else in order to live in a house they don't own. So Nicole, I might get your thoughts, but if anyone else wants to jump in on that, what's some of the options for renters, specifically, I guess, with regard to their rent and how they could potentially save a bit of money?
Yeah, look, the levers to pull there are really to try and do something that's instead of rent, make yourself incredibly valuable, do something to protect that property, to add value to that property. That's kind of one of the things that, if you think about the shortages, we talked about labor shortages, services shortages, price, growth, doing something like maintenance around the place. If you can't get a carpenter, if you've got some handy skills, things like that are going to value add to your landlord and actually save them money, might be something that they might consider really useful and stop them from putting the rent up. So it is going to be a lot about thinking outside the box for renters. They're in a very unenviable position right now, but so are mortgage holders, to be honest.
Yeah, Yeah, we're all in this together in a way.
Everyone needs
Alison,
that house over their roof, and just bear in
Yeah.
mind that anything more than 30%, of your salary being consumed by the roof over your head is considered renting or mortgage stress. So just keep that in mind. If you're paying more than that, it might be time to think a little differently.
And
Both
I
of
guess
pay rises at the very least,
Yeah, well, I want to come to pay rises in a moment. Alison or Sarah, do either of you have any thoughts on renters, or just generally speaking, anything to add in at this point?
I do. I have something actually really important to mention on this topic, and it's that the dynamic between renters and landlords can feel very one way. I know I've had some feedback from renters recently who are in different situations, and I'm friends and readers and things, and they're in these situations and they say, I don't really feel like I have much choice, or I feel really like I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with this. And I keep telling them, go back to wherever you live, go back to the tribunal or the tenancy board in your area, because that's not fair. Whatever situation is upon them is not fair. And it could be things like they've been given only a few weeks' notice to move out, or they've been given a $250 a week rental increase when their rent started at $500 and it jumped up to $750. There are many, many laws designed to protect renters, to protect both sides, actually. There's a lot of laws in place for both landlords and renters. But in your situation, if you have had one of these massive rental increases or something that has popped up that you just feel is really difficult, you can negotiate back. They might say no, they might do nothing, but if you go to the tenancy tribunal, they might be able to help you negotiate a lower increase, or there might be some options for you. And there's really strict rules that landlords have to follow too. You have to give a certain amount of notice for rental increases, and depending on the state you're in, you have to give an actual reason why you want someone to move out. You can't just have a no reason eviction. So it really differs from state to state, but I would say if you're in that rental stress situation, lean on your property manager. They're there working for you as well as the landlord. They're meant to help both of you. So yeah, try to get some advice if you're in a stressful situation, and don't just feel like because you're the tenant, you've got no sway in this whole situation. You are helping them pay off their mortgage. So you're a very important part of the equation.
Very true. I want to actually, Alison, I want to throw you a little bit of a curly one that I didn't tell you ahead of time, so I apologize for that ahead of it. The reason I say that, the reason I want to ask though, is because obviously this conversation about rent and mortgage, in either case, it's about where you live. Now, the one thing that renters do have is a bit of flexibility. Flexibility has become a word that we've heard a lot of when it comes to working environments, when it comes to living arrangements. Now, you mentioned earlier in the stream that you work completely remotely. You don't live in a major city. You used to. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, your experience from sort of being in that position that a lot of people maybe have considered over the last couple of years about moving out of a major city?
Yeah, definitely. That was going to be my tip anyway. I think
that,
because it's a great one. I think, with the renting versus mortgage holder thing, it is a tough one, and I do feel for everyone renting at the moment. I'm renting myself. I know that it's tough, and I think it's important to remember that landlords need you as well. They really, really need you, and the last thing that they want is people moving out and their property sitting empty, even if it's for a couple of weeks, because that is going to cost them more than it would have to, negotiate with you on the rent increase. So if you do get hit with this sort of crazy rent increase, don't feel like you just have to take it. So, you can talk to them about it and try to negotiate, and, remind them that you are good tenants. You always pay on time. You've kept the house neat and tidy. And at the end of the day, they really need you as well. So give that a go. But also, I think the flexibility thing is a good advantage of renting. You don't have to stay anywhere for too long. You can choose to move around. If you need to stay in your city for work, maybe that's moving into a place where you can rent with someone else, or if you currently live in a 2-bedroom place, maybe you can move to a 3-bedroom place, and that third person would really make a lot of difference to your rent. You can also move to a different suburb that's maybe a little bit further away, but if you're working at home a couple of extra days than you were, last year, it might be fine, it might be doable. Or you could do what I did and just completely move to a whole other town altogether. If your job allows it, it's a really good option. You can save a lot of money on rent, and it can help you, save up a deposit that way, even if it's just temporary. If you are able to do it with your work and you consider doing it for a couple of years, purely with the goal to stay for a deposit and move back, could be something worth considering as well. And remember that as well as working remotely, that it's still an employee's market at the moment. So there's still lots of jobs going, and you also have the power to sort of negotiate at work as well, and work remotely or change jobs for a bit more money, because there's lots of jobs around.
Yeah. And I would just add to that as well. I don't anymore, but I lived in regional Australia for several years, and it's a totally different experience and a really, really positive one. So the idea of sort of moving out bush again for a couple of years, not to say that you moved that far out, but far enough to make a difference when it comes to your rent, it could be something that you really look back on and really appreciate, even if it is only temporary. So not to say that the answer to can't afford rent is just move, because that's simplistic and really not the point we're making, but there are options out there.
But I do think you guys are right. Like, the conditions for rent vesting, the planets are really coming into alignment here. To as Alison was saying, living close to where you need to work, perhaps, but in a flexible way, renting, perhaps sharing, rooms, letting, etc., to reduce that cost. But then investing elsewhere, somewhere more affordable. We're getting those tax deductions to help you with the mortgage itself, not committing yourself to sort of the same, maybe more expensive area that you need to live for work, but where there, prices are coming down pretty much everywhere, where things are getting cheaper, and when there's record low vacancy rates. So your tenants should be really assured. And that's a really nice way of, keeping that flexibility in that lifestyle, but also keeping your wealth ticking over and just that foot on the ladder as well.
Absolutely. All right, we've only got we've got about 9 minutes more to go, so we do have some more questions in time for questions, and we've also got a little bit of time to ask more questions. But I want to do a round of questions that I really love. I actually really love this question, and if we end on it, that's fine. If we have time for another question at the end, that's fine as well. But in the context of inflation, it affects everything, right? And so in a way, it's really just about general financial advice. What financial advice would you give to the 19-year-old version of you? That's the question. I love this. So Sarah, I might start with you. If you had the option to get in a DeLorean and go back in time and leave a Post-it note or whatever the correct medium is, what would you say?
This is just absolutely my favorite question. And I saw it pop through on the chat, and I just did a little bit of quick calculating, because my number one tip for anyone, particularly if you're younger, is to harness the power of compounding. It is just a ridiculous game changer. And if you are 19 or 25, if you are under 30 and you're watching this right now, you can be a millionaire by doing very, very little. It's just going to take you a while to get there. And that's the power of compounding. I wish I understood this stuff 20 years ago, because I'm 40. And if I had applied these things 20 years ago, I wouldn't have to buy a restaurant to try and boost my income, put it that way. So I just crunched the numbers really quickly. The average savings account at the moment is 3%, which is, that's fairly low. But if all you did was at 19 years of age, 20 years of age, you started putting $25 a week into a savings account, and you just let it compound. And compound means that every time you earn interest, that also earns interest. You earn interest on your interest. So it's like a big snowball going down a hill. If you put $25 a week away at 19, in 50 years' time, by the time you are 69, you are going to have $150,000 in the bank. That's pretty achievable for most people. However, if you pop it in the share market, and there's lots and lots of different ways to do this. This is the big thing. When I was 19, I was terrified of shares. I just thought I was going to lose all my money. But there's lots of ways to do this that are not as intimidating as it might first sound. If you put that $25 a week into the share market, the average return in shares over the last 50 years is around 9 to 10% a year. So I went on the lower end, popped it in at 9%. That $25 a week, by the time 50 years have passed and you are 69, is going to be worth $1.27 million for $25 a week. Now, share markets go up and down like a big fat roller coaster. So it's sometimes your investment is going to seem really high and sometimes it's going to tank. But if you have a really long-term strategy and you start doing it now no matter what your age, whoever is watching this, start doing something now, because the smallest amounts can have a massive impact down the track.
What is it? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So
Exactly.
plant your trees. Nicole, what would you say to little Miss Pedersen-McKinnon, if you were Pedersen-McKinnon back then?
Well, it's Pedersen back then.
Pedersen.
Yes, exactly what Sarah said, basically. So I've written before. So when I was 18 years old, my mum frog marched me to a stockbroker and went, you sit down here and you listen to him and he's going to tell you how to invest. And so I started dabbling and I started saving. And so buying parcels of shares, $500 at a time. And back then, like, brokerage was really expensive. It was really hard to do. It was really like a few $100 a time it was costing me, when they were big investments. Now it's like sub $10 to buy each parcel of shares. So it's really possible to kind of save or invest regularly into the stock market. So the way you harness the power of compounding with a share investment is you get those dividends and you reinvest the dividends. So you go for dividend reinvestment, which usually means you get a discount on the new shares that you buy. So you're getting new shares each time with the income that you're earning. It's not interest in this circumstance, it's investment income. And they roll up and they roll up and they roll up until you get what I call the snowball of success. And if you look at a compounding chart, when you start off with these little bits of money that you think are not making any difference, it's pretty flat. And then it takes off really quite sharply and very quickly, just with small amounts of money, but done regularly. That's the key. It gets just vertical and your wealth just builds just astronomically. So yeah, start today.
All right, Alison, if you feel like it, you can say this, the same one that we all seem to agree on is the number one
tip. It's the best one. And
it's a really hard question because there's only one answer.
Yeah, there's only one answer. Invest early. And it's funny because I'm sure many people did tell me this when I was 19, and I didn't do it. But just I guess to say something different, just so we're not repeating ourselves. Something that I have always done since I was younger is to pay yourself first. And it's just a really good way to always make sure that, you're just saving money, investing money, whatever it might be. So every time you get paid, instead of spending your money for the month and at the end of the month saying, oh, I've got a little bit left over, cool, I'll put it in my savings, or I don't have any money left over this month. Just pay yourself first. So get a set amount per month that you want to pay, treat it as any other bill, like treat it as rent to yourself or whatever you want to picture it as. Put that money in a savings account straight away or into the share market or into your super, whatever it might be. Just make sure you pay yourself first and then you can pay for everything else and sort out the rest of your spending. But yeah, treat your payment to yourself like any other bill.
I might throw another one in there, of course, by sheer dint of my age. The main answer would have been buy Bitcoin. But let's talk about something a little bit more functional. What I would have told myself to do about 10 years earlier than I did is to automate my savings. I don't remember where I eventually, I remember the day that I started doing it, I realized immediately what impact it would have. Because as soon as my paycheck goes in, and I've been doing this for, 5 or 6, I'm probably closer to 10 years now, a certain amount of that paycheck would automatically be transferred out to a savings account. And a certain amount would be transferred out to a robo-investor, which automatically invests in a set of index funds or exchange traded funds, ETFs. And I don't remember that happened. And so I haven't thought about it for the last 10 years. And it has made an enormous difference to personally my ability to save. So if you're not doing that now, I would highly recommend. It's an amazing combination for all of these things. They all kind of lead into each other. Pay yourself first, take advantage of the compounding interest, and do it in a way that you don't miss it. Because if you look at your app and find out how much money you got at the start of the month or the start of the fortnight, the money's already gone. So in your head, you're not going to worry about it. So that would be my.
You're not losing anything.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
It was like never yours to be.
Never there.
You just pay
Exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, look, we're about on time. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much to everyone on this panel. Nicole Pedersen-McKinnon, you can read her in a variety of different mastheads, but also on finder.com.au. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Sarah Megginson, it's always a pleasure. Head of Editorial, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our money editor, Alison Banney, thank you so much again for coming on another panel.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great.
And of course, thank you, for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this. If you're still around, please like, subscribe, follow us on all the various channels, and head over to finder.com.au. Maybe download the app, become a member, and see how we can start sort of adding a bit of value to you. Of course, comparing is something we do very well. So until next time, I guess, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.